And on we go to England versus Scotland. England 0, Scotland 0 down at Wembley. There are your teams. Gareth Southgate changes his fullbacks. Otherwise, all the same. Pickford in goal. James and Shaw coming at fullback for Trippier and Walker. Stones and Mings continue at centre half and get another clean sheet. Rice and Phillips in midfield. It's not quite how SofaScore's got it lined up there. Mount trying to get ahead of them rather than maybe a flat midfield three. Sterling and Foden wide with Harry Kane now becoming a bit of the lightning rod for England fans. Remember, we don't get the most balanced debate around England, and there's always someone that needs to be the lightning rod. It's often Raheem Sterling. Seems to not be Tyrone Mings anymore now, which is good for Tyrone, I guess. And now lots of eyes on Harry Kane, who doesn't quite seem himself and hasn't been an influence in either of the games. And Scotland, a few changes for them. So Marshall in goal. McTominay moves in to the centre-back positions. Hanley stays where he was. Tierney, who didn't start the first game, comes in. Robertson and O'Donnell remain as the wing-backs. And then out goes Armstrong from midfield. Obviously, McTominay has moved back. So 2 slots in midfield up for grabs, taken by Billy Gilmore and John McGinn. And again, I saw that midfield shape a little bit differently. Gilmore sat just behind McGinn and McGregor, who were sort of playing on the front foot and pressing. Che Adams starts over Christie and with Lyndon Dykes up top. And again, I'll bring into the conversation right now this idea that we didn't know how good everybody was in this group. And I think after the first set of games, or maybe before the first set of games, we had Croatia, who now people think they're worse than they were at the start. England, after this game, people are going to think they're worse. Scotland, people are going to now think they're better. And everyone thinks the Czech Republic were going to finish fourth or third. And, you know, they're a little bit better. So we're a bit all over the place with this group going into the last game, aren't we? Anyway, on this one, probably best chance really for England of the whole game comes after 10:58. You can see on the clock there. John Stones jumps a little bit too early, gets the free header, heads it against the post. And we're in 2 things can be true mode here. Yes, it's a bad miss and should have scored. And yes, it's unlucky because he hits the post. I don't know where you draw the line on that, but maybe, like I say, just jumped a little bit too early. Bit of a let-off for the Scots, and no more free headers in this game after this one. Mason Mount, not long after from Sterling's break, can't quite open up his right foot and stick that to David Marshall's left into the other corner. And depressingly from an England point of view, that was as good as it got. Those 2 chances. I know Shaw breaks in the second half. Mount has a shot, but then the game becomes very much Scotland gradually growing into it and becoming a bit more of a threat. There you can see about half hour. I think that's the closest the Scots came, wasn't it? Great work by Tierney and Robertson down the left, and O'Donnell with the shot on the volley with the right foot. It's good save by Pickford, good effort. Actually, it would have been a really good goal if it had gone in. And then into the second half, Lyndon Dykes, you can see, so it's a bit blurry, is going to volley that. I'm still not entirely sure whether it was going to hit the post, go just wide, or whether it was going in, but Reece James heads off the line as such, or preventative header. And I think one more we've got, Che Adams on the angle on the half volley on 77. Grealish throws himself in to get a bit of a block. It would have been a really good finish to score from there on the angle on the half volley. And Che Adams drills that one just wide. So that was all she wrote. And it's difficult. It's difficult to talk about England because obviously we absorb all the noise, and the noise is very extreme. And it's I think to try and give a balanced view, you have to listen to the overarching mood which was very negative after yesterday, and then try and see through. And look, I'm not saying the overarching mood and the negative view is wrong, but sometimes it's a little bit binary with England. Either they're, the best thing since sliced bread, or the worst thing since sliced bread, and sliced bread gets brought into this. But look, Scotland are not the world's best team, and England are not the world's worst team. Scotland were not utterly, utterly amazing, and England were not utterly, utterly terrible. Those narratives I'm just not buying. I know on a 0-0 draw we need something to talk about, but it's in the grey area, and the grey area may not be as entertaining as me screaming and ranting and raving about England whilst simultaneously saying that a Scotland team who have 1 point and literally have not scored a goal in this tournament are the second coming of Brazil 1970 wouldn't be the right thing to do. It would be right to say that I think England underwhelmed and did not meet people's expectations for what was expected of them, and Scotland exceeded people's expectations. To what extent is a difficult one to judge, isn't it? Looking at the numbers, England 1.45 on the XG to 0.66. So for all of the discussion about Scotland playing well, which they did, it was a good performance by Scotland, they still haven't scored in the tournament, and they created far fewer chances in this game than they did against the Czechs, where I thought Scotland were actually quite unlucky against the Czechs, where Patrick Schick was really good and they didn't finish their chances, did they? I think Scotland won the old XG battle on that one. So this was a different side to the Scots, where it was, not to say that they were defensive, but they did adopt okay, we're going to frustrate. And then you have to say, in fairness to Steve Clarke and the Scots, they did push on towards the end of the game. And frankly, as I said when we were looking at the chances, from minute 12, after Mount gets in the box from Sterling's chance, you'd have to say, if you started the game there, very, very even, and probably even in terms of chance creation, Scotland edging it. Looking at some other numbers, 11 shots to 9 in favour of the Scots, 2-1 on target, 6-5 on the corners. 3 big chances to 0 for the English is an interesting one. As usual, don't get too emotional about that number. It's generated by algorithm and isn't an emotionally generated stat, so it doesn't warrant an emotional response we often do get on these type of things. But look, from an England point of view, yes, it was underwhelming. I don't know what score you'd give it out of 10. I think when people are a little bit more removed from the game, you're immediately bombarded, and I had to go and take the dogs for a walk just to get out of the bubble for a second, with woeful, terrible, pathetic, embarrassing, and all of those things. I think when you're a little bit removed, I think that's one step too far. I'm with underwhelming, a little bit flat from England in microcosm in that game. Big picture, it's fine. They've got 4 points. And honestly, if you're looking for something good to come out of it, if England draw against the Czechs, they now would avoid Group F. So there you go. Every cloud and all that. But I think what people are worried about is the England pattern of play, aren't they? And the things that appeared to work against Croatia, who set up a little bit differently and did try and progress the ball in a slightly different way, whereas Scotland were good on transition, weren't they? Utilised that left-hand side, stole the ball, happy to hit dikes now and then as well. The things that worked against Croatia, it just didn't work against Scotland. And England had a couple of decent chances against Croatia, but in the main they had the one really good chance, which played right to Sterling's strengths, where he can run onto and score whilst someone else has got the ball up the pitch and, be that man time in the run and finishing like he does for Manchester City. We just didn't get any of that. Scotland clearly won the midfield battle with McGinn and McGregor particularly able to just get around Declan Rice, and Phillips tried to progress himself, but it was cut off at source, and England just did not play through the centre of the pitch at all. And then when things went loose, Billy Gilmour was very good. Again, we tend to get into hyperbole very quickly. Look, he doesn't immediately become a cross between Roy Keane and Andrea Pirlo straight away, but he sat a little bit further back and used the ball really well. Had a good battle with Mount, which I thought Mount was winning at the start, but then towards the end, Gilmour was the main influence. And that may be systematic rather than perhaps Mason Mount's fault per se. And then down the sides, yes, the fullbacks got forward and had the ball, but nothing really happening. And because of that inability to use the centre of the pitch effectively, then Harry Kane, who's one of the best in the game at coming short and people running off him, couldn't get the wide guys narrow. Central guys didn't get forward, and Scotland played that well, didn't they? I thought Grant Hanley played well, who was kind of the spare centre back. He came and attacked the ball, and sort of captain type stuff there, bringing the line up, and Robertson and Tierney looked good. So what I'm saying is, again, I'll reiterate, England were underwhelming and flat. I don't believe they were woeful and terrible and the worst team ever. Scotland exceeded expectations, and I think we can see now that they're not a bad side when after the Czech game everyone's like, oh, Scotland are done and they're going to get knocked out and all of this. From a Scottish point of view, they need to stick the ball in the back of the net, because if they don't score in the next game, yes, they could draw 0-0, but then they're going to finish with 2 points and they will go home with 2 points, with England and the Czechs already on 4, and plenty of other teams will have 3 in third place. So there is optimism for Scotland, but they now need to go and... Can they go and beat the Croats now? They need to stick the ball in the back of the net, don't they? And there was a bit of a sense that their performance was... Like, imagine a playoff game, a two-legger. That would have been a really good away performance in a playoff game, wouldn't it? Where you set up against maybe a favourite, frustrate, come away with the point. You then have to go and win the home game, don't you? Yeah? You don't have an away goal or whatever. You don't have away goals in playoffs, but take like a Champions League game or whatever. So they've now essentially got to do the next part of the job, the Scots. And I wish them the best of luck, honestly. It was a manful performance. And again, I'll reiterate, Scotland are not the world's greatest football team and England are not the world's worst football team. But the Scottish fans are going to be more optimistic going into the next game than the English fans are, for sure. But the big difference is England have a goal on the board and the 3 points. Scotland don't yet. Can they do it against Croatia? And like I say, best of luck. England is going to be... It's going to be interesting now because I thought Graham Souness was quite good on this. Are there systematic flaws in this system now where if you take a team like Scotland who were quite happy to say, well, go on then, score past us. By the way, we're going to stop your central midfield area. We'll do a bit of a sacrifice and, maybe we're not going to have John McGinn pinging the ball around or trying to get forward and supporting like he might do for Villa, but it's going to be damn effective. That... and it almost seems now, ridiculously, like England might be set up better to do that to a France and Portugal than... You can imagine England now coming up against Sweden and you get a similar sort of... I don't know whether they can meet them in the... I'm just picking a team off my head who will sit back against England. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Again, we have to, when we're analysing this, try and get some sense of balance. And look, you know what the noise is going to say now. They're going to want a change of system and the England fan sort of group thing, and they're going to want about 5 new players in. The change of system I do actually accept because, let me just say this, if England went 3-4-3 in the next game, if Harry Maguire was fit, I mean, this does mean that you would take Mason Mount out of central midfield, possibly. If you're not going to use the centre of the pitch in that way, go 3 at the back, keep your double pivot, and use your wing backs to get overloads and have a front 3 then to get people closer to Kane and get your inside forwards a bit more narrow. I can see the big thing people are going to say is you need to break up Rice and Phillips now and, you know, change the central midfield sort of area. So I can see that being a popular argument as well. But we will fathom what's going to go on later in the week ahead of the next 2 games, obviously Scotland, Croatia, and England, Czech Republic, where I'll repeat, England know if they stink that out and bore draw it, they get a better draw than if they play beautifully and win 4-0, you know, and go and face one of Portugal, France or Germany from Group F. So, you never know, small mercies, things could actually work out better. I know people argue they're away from Wembley if they do. Well, you know, pick your poison. Playing away from Wembley, everyone else is playing away, many teams are playing away from their home stadiums, aren't they? Or get an easier opponent. I mean, you tell me what is better, worse, etc. So look, in conclusion, England underwhelmed, Scotland overwhelmed, exceeded their expectations. You would be proud if you were a Scotsman, with the caveat, the job is not done. They need to go and score a goal and win a game after this good performance. And the flip side, England are not the worst team in the world. That wasn't the most terrible performance since football ever began. It was flat. It was underwhelming. Yes. What happens now? And I'm really being optimistic. Could it be a blessing in disguise where Southgate learns the lesson early in the tournament before he comes up against one of the knockout teams? Who knows? Let me know what you think down there in the comments. England 0, Scotland 0.